15 years. 15 years I gave to Blackwell Innovations, building their marketing division from a 3-person team to an award-winning department of 42. 15 years of canceled vacations, missed anniversaries, and 3 a.m. strategy calls with international clients. I made that company millions while Richard Bennett, my so-called boss, took all the credit. The night he humiliated me at the company gala, reducing me to tears in front of everyone, I wanted to quit on the spot. But something told me to wait, to endure just a little longer. 1 month later, at the annual board meeting, when Richard's smug face transformed into pure horror as I walked in and took my seat at the head of the table, that moment was worth every second of humiliation. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. You see, while Richard was busy undermining me, he never bothered to check who actually owned 51% of the company he thought was his. Sometimes revenge isn't about striking back immediately. It's about knowing exactly when to reveal your hand. I still remember my first day at Blackwell Innovations. It was 2008, and the financial crisis had just devastated the tech sector. The company occupied half a floor in a tired office building downtown, just 12 employees trying to carve out a niche in enterprise software solutions. I was hired as marketing director, though director was a generous term for overseeing 2 junior associates and a budget that barely covered our coffee expenses. The company founder, Gerald Blackwell, was an engineering genius, but admitted freely that marketing was his blind spot. "Make us visible, Olivia," he told me during my interview. "I know what we're building is revolutionary. I just need someone who can make others see it too." And I did. I worked relentlessly those first few years, developing our brand identity, building relationships with industry journalists, creating campaigns that highlighted our unique strengths without the astronomical budgets our competitors enjoyed. I turned limitations into advantages, positioning Blackwell as the scrappy underdog disrupting a stagnant industry. Our first major feature in Tech Innovator magazine brought in 3 new enterprise clients within a week. By year 3, our marketing team had expanded to 8 people, and our campaigns were winning regional awards. Gerald was always appreciative, always acknowledged my contributions. "Olivia's the reason anyone knows who we are," he'd say at company meetings, embarrassing me with his praise. We developed a close professional relationship, often staying late to debate strategy or brainstorm new approaches. He trusted my instincts, even when they seemed counterintuitive. When I suggested repositioning our flagship product to target healthcare specifically, abandoning the broader approach we'd been using, Gerald gave me the green light despite concerns from the sales team. 6 months later, healthcare contracts represented 60% of our revenue. Everything changed when Gerald's health began failing in 2015. He started stepping back from daily operations, coming into the office less frequently. The transition was gradual, but we all felt his absence. The company had grown to over 80 employees by then, and our marketing department was considered among the most innovative in the industry. I had been promoted to Chief Marketing Officer, sitting on the executive leadership team. When Gerald announced he needed to retire completely to focus on his health, nobody was surprised when Richard Bennett was named as the new CEO. Richard had joined Blackwell 4 years earlier as Chief Operating Officer. He came with an impressive resume: Harvard MBA, successful stints at 2 Fortune 500 companies, and a reputation for driving operational efficiency. Tall, always impeccably dressed, with a smile that never quite reached his eyes, Richard embodied corporate polish. Gerald had brought him in specifically to manage our rapid growth, handling the operational challenges while Gerald focused on product innovation. The arrangement worked well enough, though many of us noticed the stylistic differences between the 2 men. Where Gerald was collaborative and transparent, Richard preferred top-down decision-making. Gerald celebrated team achievements. Richard seemed focused on individual performance metrics. The first 6 months under Richard's leadership seemed promising. He made a point of meeting with each department head, understanding their processes and challenges. When we met, he was complimentary about marketing's achievements. "Impressive work, Olivia," he said, reviewing our latest campaign results. "Gerald always spoke highly of your department. I can see why." I left that meeting feeling cautiously optimistic. The subtle undermining began so gradually that I barely noticed it at first. Richard started excluding me from certain executive meetings, claiming they were operations-focused and wouldn't require marketing input. Then came the requests for exhaustive justifications of marketing expenses that had never been questioned before. "Just establishing proper governance," he explained smoothly when I asked about the new requirements. "Nothing personal." But it felt personal when he brought in Jackson Hayes as our new brand strategy consultant, without discussing it with me first. Jackson was 42, 7 years younger than me, with precisely 1/3 of my industry experience, but twice the confidence. He had worked with Richard at his previous company and shared the same MBA pedigree. "Jackson's just here to provide a fresh perspective," Richard assured me when I confronted him about it. "Your position isn't changing, Olivia. You're still CMO. In title only, as it turned out." Within weeks, Jackson was attending all executive meetings as Richard's marketing proxy. Important client discussions were rerouted through him. My team started receiving conflicting directions. Assignments from me would be countermanded by urgent requests from Jackson, always with Richard's blessing. The confusion was affecting morale and productivity. When I tried addressing it, with Richard directly, his response was textbook gaslighting. "I think you might be feeling a bit threatened, Olivia," he said, leaning back in his ergonomic chair. "Jackson's not trying to replace you. He's helping modernize our approach. Marketing has changed dramatically in recent years. Digital transformation, data analytics, programmatic campaigns. I'm sure it's challenging to keep up with all the new developments at this stage in your career." This stage in my career. I was 49, not 79. I'd led the implementation of our marketing automation system. I'd championed our shift to content marketing long before our competitors. Our data-driven campaign model had been featured as a case study in Marketing Innovation Quarterly just last year. But Richard was constructing a narrative where I was becoming obsolete, too stuck in traditional approaches to embrace new methodologies. I pushed back, of course. I compiled data showing our department's year-over-year growth, comparative, industry benchmarks, innovation metrics. Richard would review it all with theatrical patience, then proceed as if the conversation had never happened. Decisions continued to flow through Jackson, who was suddenly invited to represent marketing at industry events that had always been my responsibility. My team noticed. How could they not? Elena, my most senior manager who'd been with me for 7 years, stopped by my office after one particularly frustrating meeting where Jackson had presented my strategy as his own brainchild. "What's going on, Olivia?" she asked quietly, closing the door behind her. "Everyone's confused about the chain of command and the way Richard keeps undermining you in meetings. It's uncomfortable to watch." "Politics," I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Richard wants his own people in key positions. I'm just collateral damage because I was close to Gerald." But saying it aloud made the situation more real, more painful. I'd given 15 years to building something I believed in, and now I was being systematically pushed aside by someone who'd arrived long after the hardest work was done. The isolation intensified. Richard formed a digital transformation task force that included every department head except me. Marketing was represented by Jackson. I was removed from the product development committee that I'd served on for a decade. My budget approval threshold was reduced, requiring Richard's sign-off on expenses that had previously been within my authority. Each change was presented as a neutral organizational adjustment, never as the targeted campaign it clearly was. Through it all, I maintained my professionalism. I continued producing exceptional work, supporting my team, and trying to navigate the increasingly hostile environment. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. With dignity, some colleagues questioned why I didn't just leave. The truth was complicated. Partly pride, partly conviction that I shouldn't be forced out of a company I'd helped build, and partly a strange sense that something wasn't adding up about Richard's rapid consolidation of power. Gerald had stepped away from daily operations, but he remained chairman of the board. We still met occasionally for lunch, though his declining health made these meetings less frequent. During these conversations, he seemed distracted, often tired, but never indicated any dissatisfaction with my performance. If anything, he remained as appreciative as ever. "Blackwell wouldn't be where it is without you, Olivia," he told me, during our last lunch, patting my hand with his frail one. Never forget that. I wished I could ask him directly about Richard's behavior, but it felt inappropriate to burden him with company politics while he was focusing on his health. The company's annual gala had always been a highlight of our calendar, a celebration of the year's achievements, recognition of key contributors, and an opportunity to strengthen the company culture. In previous years, I'd actually helped organize these events, ensuring they reflected our values and spotlighted team accomplishments across departments. This year, planning was handled by Richard's new executive assistant, Meredith, with input from Jackson. My offers to help were politely declined. The event was scheduled at the Grand Meridian Hotel, significantly more lavish than our previous venues. Walking into the ballroom that evening, I felt a knot forming in my stomach. The space was elegantly decorated, but nothing about it felt like Blackwell, not the elaborate ice sculptures, not the string quartet playing in the corner, not the assigned seating that separated team members from their managers. This wasn't a celebration of our community. It was a corporate performance. I was seated at a table far from the executive dais where Richard presided with Jackson prominently positioned at his right hand. My table companions were mostly from departments I rarely interacted with, plus 2 clients I didn't recognize. Throughout dinner, I maintained pleasant conversation while watching Richard work the room, moving from table to table with practiced charm, stopping at every table except mine. After dinner came the awards presentation. In previous years, recognition had been distributed widely, celebrating contributions from across the organization. Tonight, the focus was noticeably different. Most awards went to recent hires, many with connections to Richard's previous companies. Jackson received the Innovation Excellence Award for a rebranding initiative that had originally been my proposal. I applauded politely, ignoring the sympathetic glances from longtime colleagues. As coffee and dessert were served, Richard took the stage again, champagne flute in hand. Before we continue the celebration, I'd like to take a moment to recognize someone who's been with Blackwell through its entire journey. My heart skipped. Was this a genuine acknowledgement after months of marginalization? Olivia Parker has been our chief marketing officer for many years, he continued, gesturing toward my table. A spotlight suddenly found me, and I felt heat rise to my face as all eyes turned in my direction. Olivia represents the old Blackwell, the scrappy startup that fought for every client, every opportunity. His tone was almost nostalgic, as if describing a quaint relic. As we evolve into a truly enterprise-level organization, it's important to honor the bridges that brought us here, even as we build new, stronger ones for the future. The metaphor wasn't subtle. I was the old bridge, useful once, but now obsolete as the company evolved beyond me. Scattered applause followed, uncomfortable and brief. The spotlight lingered painfully before moving back to Richard, who smoothly transitioned to introducing the architects of Blackwell's future, a group that, unsurprisingly, included Jackson, prominently. I maintained my composure through sheer force of will, smiling stiffly as people avoided eye contact with me for the remainder of the evening. Elena stopped by briefly, squeezing my shoulder in silent support. "What an ass," she whispered, before being called away by her husband. I left as soon as was socially acceptable, the valet retrieving my car while I stood alone in the cool night air, fighting back tears of humiliation and rage. Driving home, my emotions cycled through hurt, anger, and something approaching clarity. Richard's public dismissal of my contributions wasn't just casual cruelty, it was calculated. He was establishing a narrative, positioning me as a relic of the past while he and his chosen circle represented the future. The message to the entire company was clear: align with the new regime or be relegated to irrelevance. I barely slept that night, my mind racing through options. Resignation was the obvious choice. My professional reputation was still strong in the industry, and several competitors had extended offers over the years. I could walk away, preserve my dignity, and let Richard continue his systematic dismantling of everything Gerald and I had built. The thought left a bitter taste in my mouth. By morning, I'd made a decision. I wouldn't resign. Not yet. Richard's behavior was too deliberate, too targeted to be simple management preference. There was something I was missing, some piece of the puzzle that would explain his methodical campaign to push me out rather than simply firing me. Gerald had always valued me. Despite his reduced involvement, he remained chairman of the board. The annual board meeting was scheduled in 4 weeks. Before making any irrevocable decisions, I needed to understand the full picture. That morning, I did something I'd never done in 15 years at Blackwell. I called in sick. I needed space to think, to strategize, to prepare for whatever came next. As I sat on my balcony, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of promise, a strange calm settled over me. Richard had humiliated me publicly, thinking it would break me. Instead, it had clarified something I'd forgotten in the daily struggle to defend my position. I wasn't just fighting for my job or my reputation, I was fighting for the company Gerald and I had built together, the vision we'd shared when Blackwell was just a dream occupying half a floor in a tired downtown building. Patience, I whispered to myself, sipping my coffee as the morning light grew stronger. Just a little longer. The board meeting was coming, and with it, perhaps, answers. What Richard didn't know, couldn't know, was that I had no intention of remaining silent any longer. The spotlight he'd so cruelly turned on me at the gala would soon be redirected, and I had a feeling he wouldn't find it nearly as amusing when our roles were reversed. The morning after the gala, I didn't recognize the woman staring back at me in the bathroom mirror. Dark circles shadowed my eyes, and the confident set of my shoulders had vanished overnight. 15 years of building something meaningful, reduced to a patronizing toast and pitying glances. I'd called in sick for the first time in my career, but the truth was, I couldn't bear to walk into that office and face the aftermath of Richard's public dismantling. My phone had been buzzing since dawn, messages from Elena and other team, members expressing outrage, offering support. I appreciated their loyalty but couldn't bring myself to respond. What would I say? That I was fine? That it didn't matter? Lies wouldn't help any of us now. By noon, restlessness drove me out of the apartment. I found myself walking through Riverside Park, watching families and joggers enjoy the unseasonably warm October day. 3 teenagers were attempting skateboard tricks near the fountain, failing spectacularly, but laughing with each fall. Their resilience struck me, the willingness to get up after every failure, to try again without self-consciousness or doubt. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. The screen displayed a name I hadn't expected. Catherine Blackwell, Gerald's daughter. We'd met several times over the years at company functions and occasionally when she accompanied her father to the office. She'd been living abroad for the past few years, working for an international humanitarian organization. "Olivia," she said when I answered, her voice warm but concerned. "I've been trying to reach you since last night. Are you okay?" "Catherine?" I found a bench and sat down. "I'm fine. Just needed some air. Are you back in town? Landed yesterday. I was actually at the gala last night, though I doubt you saw me. I came in late and stayed at the back. She paused. What Richard did was inexcusable. The knot in my stomach tightened. You saw that. Everyone saw it, Olivia. It was deliberately public. She sighed. Dad's been worried about Richard's leadership for months, but he didn't want to interfere. After last night, though, we need to talk. Can you meet me at Westlake Hospital in an hour? Dad's having some tests done and I'm heading there now. The mention of Gerald in the hospital pushed all other concerns aside. Is he all right? Stable but frustrated with being poked and prodded. Having you there might lift his spirits. I'll be there in 45 minutes. Westlake Hospital's modernist architecture stood in stark contrast to the historical buildings surrounding it. Inside, the sterile scent of disinfectant and hushed voices created that universal hospital atmosphere that always made my skin crawl. Catherine was waiting in the visitors' lounge, her tall frame folded uncomfortably in a vinyl chair as she scrolled through her phone. She looked up as I approached, her features so similar to Gerald's. The same intelligent eyes, the same slight asymmetry to her smile. She rose and embraced me warmly. At 38, Catherine had the poised confidence of someone who had found her purpose early and pursued it relentlessly. Her work developing sustainable agriculture programs in developing countries had earned her international recognition, though she rarely spoke about her accomplishments. He's between tests right now, she explained, leading me through a corridor. They're monitoring his heart function. Nothing critical, just precautionary. Gerald's private room was bright with afternoon sunlight streaming through large windows. He sat propped up in bed, looking smaller than I remembered, his once robust frame diminished. Still, his eyes lit up when he saw me, and the familiar spark of intelligence hadn't dimmed. Olivia, he said, extending a hand. What a sight for sore eyes. Come, sit. I took the chair beside his bed while Catherine positioned herself at the foot, arms crossed. How are you feeling? I asked him. Like a science experiment, he grumbled, gesturing to the monitoring equipment surrounding him. But don't change the subject. Catherine told me what happened last night. I shifted uncomfortably. It was just politics, Gerald. Nothing I can't handle. Politics? His eyebrows rose sharply. Publicly humiliating my chief marketing officer isn't politics. It's poor leadership and personal pettiness. The monitor beside him beeped as his heart rate increased. He took a deliberate breath, calming himself. Richard has been making increasingly questionable decisions. Financial reports show concerning patterns. Then Catherine returns and tells me he's creating a hostile environment for one of my most valued executives. Catherine leaned forward. Dad wants to know if you're planning to leave. The directness of the question caught me off guard. I've been considering my options. Gerald's face fell. I was afraid of that. He exchanged a glance with Catherine, some unspoken communication passing between them. Olivia, there's something you should know about the company structure. Something that might affect your decision. Catherine pulled a folder from her bag and handed it to me. Before we get into the legal details, I need to know, how much do you remember about the company's recapitalization during the 2010 crisis? The question transported me back 12 years, to the most challenging period in Blackwell's history. We'd been growing steadily until a critical security vulnerability was discovered in our core product. The required overhaul would take months and cost millions we didn't have. Several investors pulled out, leaving us on the brink of bankruptcy. We were weeks away from shutting down, I recalled. You restructured everything, brought in emergency funding. Gerald nodded. That's the simplified version. The reality was more complicated. Our primary investor, Ventoro Capital, demanded controlling interest in exchange for the emergency funding. I refused. We needed the money, but I wouldn't surrender. Control of the company's direction. Catherine took over. Dad went looking for alternatives. He approached several potential investors, but no one was willing to take the risk given the security issues and market conditions. Except you, Gerald said softly, looking directly at me. I blinked, confused. Me? I didn't have that kind of money, Gerald. No, but you had something equally valuable. Complete faith in what we were building and the talent to make it successful. He gestured to the folder in my hands. Open it. Inside was a legal document dated March 2010. My eyes widened as I scanned the terms. I don't understand. You were working 18-hour days trying to salvage our reputation while we fixed the security issues, Gerald explained. You mortgaged your condo to help with emergency client retention campaigns. You put everything on the line for Blackwell. I remembered that desperate period. The industry press had been circling like vultures, eager to document our downfall. I'd leveraged every relationship, called in every favor, worked myself to exhaustion crafting a narrative of transparency and commitment that somehow preserved client confidence. Your marketing strategy saved us from total collapse, Gerald continued. It gave us just enough breathing room to complete the security overhaul, but we still needed the capital infusion. Catherine picked up the narrative. Dad created a special class of shares, non-voting initially, but with specific conversion triggers that would activate full voting rights under certain conditions. He offered them to key employees who had demonstrated unwavering commitment. Most declined, Gerald said. They couldn't take the risk, but you accepted, Olivia. You invested your entire savings, plus the equity from your condo. The memory surfaced slowly. I'd been so consumed with saving the company that the legal details had received only partial attention. Gerald had presented it as a potential opportunity. If we survived, not a certainty. Given our precarious position, I'd viewed it more as a gesture of solidarity than a genuine investment. Those non-voting shares you purchased, Catherine said, pointing to a clause in the document, converted to full voting shares when Dad stepped down as CEO. The conversion ratio was 5-1. Do you understand what that means, Olivia? My hands trembled. Slightly as I calculated the implications. According to this, I own 51% of Blackwell Innovations? Gerald smiled, the familiar twinkle returning to his eyes. Technically, 51.3%. Majority ownership. The room seemed to tilt slightly. That's not possible. Wouldn't this have been disclosed when Richard took over? Catherine shook her head. The conversion was automatic, but required formal registration. Dad's illness accelerated faster than expected. In the confusion of his retirement and Richard's appointment, the paperwork wasn't filed. Legally, the conversion happened, but it hasn't been officially recorded in the corporate registry. I've had my lawyers preparing the documentation, Gerald added. It will be ready before the board meeting next month. My mind raced through the implications. Does Richard know about this? No, Catherine said firmly. And he shouldn't, not until the board meeting. Dad and I believe he's been deliberately consolidating power and removing perceived threats to his authority. If he knew you were about to become his boss, he'd accelerate his efforts to push me out, I finished, the pieces finally clicking into place. Richard's systematic campaign against me wasn't just about replacing Gerald's ally with his own people. He was unknowingly trying to marginalize the company's majority shareholder. Gerald reached for my hand. I should have handled this better, Olivia. Should have ensured the conversion was properly registered before stepping down. My illness. It's not an excuse, but it clouded my judgment, made me rush the transition. The question now, Catherine said, is what you want to do with this information. What did I want? The answer wasn't as simple as it should have been. Vindication, certainly. The opportunity to reclaim my position and restore the company culture that Richard had been dismantling. But also responsibility, the weight of majority ownership, of truly determining Blackwell's future. I need some time to process this, I said finally. Catherine nodded. You have 3 weeks until the board meeting. By then, all the legal documentation will be filed. Your ownership will be officially recognized. A nurse entered, informing us that Gerald needed to return for his final test. As Catherine helped gather his things, Gerald squeezed my hand once more. Whatever you decide, Olivia, remember this. You earned this. Not just by your financial investment, but by your unwavering commitment to what Blackwell could be. No one deserves to shape its future more than you. The drive home was a blur, my mind still struggling to absorb the revelation. Owner, majority shareholder. The woman Richard had humiliated at the gala actually controlled the company's fate. The irony was almost too perfect. At home, I spread the documents across my dining table, reading each clause carefully. Everything aligned with Gerald and Catherine's explanation. The investment I'd made in 2010, which I'd essentially written off as a gesture of loyalty during a crisis, had transformed into controlling interest in a company now valued at over $300 million. My phone buzzed with a text from Elena. Richard. Called an emergency marketing meeting today. Jackson presented a department reorganization that basically eliminates your role. I recorded it. Call me. For the first time since the gala, I felt something other than hurt and humiliation. A calm, focused anger began to crystallize. Richard wasn't just undermining me. He was actively working to remove me entirely, unaware that he was attacking the person who owned the company. I called Elena, who answered immediately. Are you okay? We've all been worried. I'm fine, I replied, surprised to discover it was true. Tell me about this reorganization. Her description confirmed my suspicions. Richard was accelerating his timeline, proposing a structure that eliminated the CMO position and distributed its responsibilities between Jackson and 2 new, director-level roles reporting directly to him. The plan would be implemented immediately, pending my transition to an advisory role, corporate speak for being pushed into irrelevance before an eventual exit. He's presenting it to the executive team tomorrow morning, Elena finished. People are outraged, Olivia, but no one knows how to stop it. I closed my eyes, considering my options. I could reveal my ownership immediately, halting Richard's plans before they gained momentum. But doing so would sacrifice the strategic advantage of surprise at the board meeting. The more Richard committed to his course, the more dramatic his eventual fall would be. Let him proceed, I said finally. Don't challenge him directly, just document everything. You're not serious, Elena protested. He's dismantling everything we've built. Trust me, I replied, a new confidence in my voice. The board meeting is in 3 weeks. Can you hold things together until then? Her hesitation was palpable. I guess so. But what happens at the board meeting? Justice, I said simply. Now tell me what else I've missed while I've been away. The next morning, I returned to the office as if nothing had changed. Heads turned as I walked confidently to my office, responding to surprised greetings with warm smiles. Richard had clearly not expected my return so soon after the gala humiliation. I could feel his eyes tracking me from the executive suite across the floor, calculating his next move. It didn't take long. By 10 a.m., his assistant Meredith appeared at my door. Mr. Bennett would like to see you, she announced, her tone suggesting it wasn't a request. Richard's office, formerly Gerald's, had been completely redesigned. Where Gerald had preferred warm woods and comfortable seating arranged for conversation, Richard had opted for sleek minimalism, glass, chrome, and a massive desk that created deliberate distance between himself and visitors. Jackson was already there, seated in one of 2 chairs positioned before the desk like supplicants before a throne. Olivia, Richard said, not rising as I entered. Feeling better? We missed you yesterday. Much better, thank you, I replied, pleasantly, taking the empty seat. Richard and Jackson exchanged glances. My calm demeanor clearly wasn't what they had anticipated. I assume Elena has briefed you on our proposed reorganization, Richard continued, sliding a document across the desk. Given your extensive history with Blackwell, I wanted to personally discuss the transition plan. I accepted the document, but didn't open it. That's thoughtful of you, Richard. My mildness seemed to unnerve him. He cleared his throat. The changes are effective immediately, but we're proposing a 3-month advisory period for you to ensure smooth knowledge transfer. Full compensation and benefits during that time, of course. Of course, I echoed, finally opening the document. The contents were exactly as Elena had described. A complete dismantling of my position, thinly veiled as organizational optimization. Jackson will assume leadership of brand strategy and client engagement, Richard continued, while we create 2 new director positions for digital marketing and product marketing. This flatter structure aligns better with our growth objectives. I looked up, meeting his gaze steadily. And after the 3-month advisory period? Richard shifted slightly, the only tell in his otherwise practiced delivery. We'll evaluate opportunities for your continued contribution at that time. Corporate euphemism for, you'll be gone. I closed the document and placed it precisely in the center of his desk. I see. A flicker of uncertainty crossed Richard's face. He had clearly prepared for resistance, tears, or resignation, not this tranquil acceptance. So you're amenable to these changes? He asked cautiously. Let's say I'm looking forward to the board meeting next month, I replied, rising from my chair. Until then, I'm happy to maintain my current responsibilities. Richard frowned. Did you not understand? The reorganization is effective immediately. Your role is transitioning to advisory starting today. I smiled, a genuine smile that seemed to disconcert him even more. I understood perfectly, and I'm choosing to continue my normal duties until the board reviews the proposed changes. As you know, significant organizational restructuring typically requires board approval, especially when it impacts C-level positions. The board will rubber stamp whatever I put in front of them, Richard said, his composure finally slipping. Gerald hasn't actively participated in months. The other members follow my recommendations without question. We'll see, I replied, turning toward the door. The meeting is only 3 weeks away. I'm sure we can all maintain the status quo. Until then. This isn't optional, Olivia, Richard called after me, his voice hardening. Clear out your office by end of day. Security will assist if necessary. I paused at the doorway, looking back at him. That would be quite a spectacle, wouldn't it? 15-year veteran executive escorted out by security? I wonder how that would play with the clients I've personally managed for over a decade, or with the industry press that considers me the face of Blackwell's marketing innovation. I let the implication hang in the air. 3 weeks, Richard. Then you can have all the reorganization you want. I walked out, leaving Richard sputtering behind me. Jackson hurried after me, catching up at the elevator. Olivia, don't make this harder than it needs to be, he said, his voice low. Richard has the board's backing. Fighting this will only damage your reputation. I studied him. Young, ambitious, willing to climb over others to advance. Not so different from me at his age, perhaps, except for one crucial distinction. I'd built something, while he was simply taking credit for others' work. Some free advice, Jackson, I said as the elevator arrived. Tie your fortunes to capability, not to power. Power changes hands more often than you think. Back in my office, I closed the door and finally allowed myself a moment of pure, unadulterated satisfaction. Richard's face when I refused to submit, that alone had been worth returning to the office. But the real confrontation was still 3 weeks away. I opened my laptop and began a new document titled Board Meeting Preparation. 3 weeks to gather evidence, build alliances, and prepare for the moment when Richard would discover that the woman he'd been systematically undermining actually controlled his professional fate. 3 weeks to decide exactly what kind of owner I wanted to be. For the first time since the gala, I felt not just anger or vindication, but genuine excitement. Richard thought he was witnessing my professional demise. In reality, he was watching me step into my power, a power I hadn't known I possessed, but one I was increasingly certain I deserved. The atmosphere in the office shifted noticeably over the next few days. Word of my confrontation with Richard spread quickly through the company grapevine, growing more dramatic with each retelling. By week's end, the story had me threatening legal action, invoking obscure corporate bylaws, and even suggesting I had compromising information about Richard's past. None of it was true, but I didn't bother correcting the rumors. Let Richard wonder what resources I might be marshalling against him. The standoff created an awkward dynamic throughout the building. Richard had publicly announced the reorganization, but I continued performing my CMO duties as if nothing had changed. My team, confused but loyal, followed my lead. Jackson found himself in the uncomfortable position of having been named to a role that the current occupant refused to vacate. The resulting uncertainty rippled through the marketing department, with team members unsure whose directives to follow. Elena cornered me in the break room on Thursday morning, her voice low despite us being alone. "What's happening, Olivia? Half the team thinks you're mounting some kind of corporate rebellion, and the other half thinks you're having a breakdown." I smiled, stirring my coffee calmly. "What do you think?" "I think you know something the rest of us don't." She studied my face carefully. "You're too calm. When Richard announced your transition, I expected, I don't know, not this. Just maintaining professional dignity until the board meeting," I replied, sipping my coffee. Elena leaned closer. "Cut the crap, Olivia. I've worked with you for 7 years. You don't maintain dignity when someone comes for your job. You fight, strategize, outmaneuver them. You're planning something, and I want in." I considered her for a long moment. Elena had been more than a colleague. She'd been a trusted ally through countless campaigns and crises. If my plan succeeded, I would need people I could rely on during the restructuring that would inevitably follow. "Not here," I said finally. "Dinner tonight. My place. 7 o'clock. She nodded once, understanding the need for discretion. Richard, meanwhile, was growing increasingly agitated by my refusal to step aside. That afternoon, he implemented a new tactic, systematically excluding me from key meetings and communications. My calendar invitations were accidentally deleted. Email threads discussing major decisions mysteriously omitted my address. When I did manage to attend meetings, Richard would redirect discussions away from any topics I raised. The childishness of it was almost amusing, but it created practical challenges. Being deliberately kept in the dark about critical decisions affecting my department made it difficult to lead effectively. By Friday, the isolation strategy had expanded. Executives from other departments stopped returning my calls, clearly under instructions to minimize contact. That evening, Elena arrived at my apartment precisely at 7, bringing a bottle of wine and an expression of barely contained curiosity. I'd spent the afternoon preparing, not just dinner, but the information I would share and how much of my strategy to reveal. "This is about more than just defending your position, isn't it?" she asked as I poured the wine. "You've never been this cryptic before." I handed her a glass. "What I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this room. Not until after the board meeting. Understood?" She nodded, settling onto my sofa. "Complete confidentiality. Now spill it." I'd decided not to show her the actual ownership documents. The fewer people with direct knowledge, the better. Instead, I gave her a simplified version of what Gerald and Catherine had revealed, emphasizing the key point. In 3 weeks, I would be recognized as Blackwell's majority shareholder. Elena's reaction progressed from disbelief to astonishment, to gleeful anticipation. "Richard has been trying to push out his boss," she said, laughter bubbling in her voice. This is poetry." "It's more complicated than that," I cautioned. "Richard has been running the company his way for over a year. He's built alliances, restructured departments, shifted our strategic focus. Simply reclaiming my position isn't enough. We need to be prepared for a significant transitional period." Her expression sobered. "What are you planning, exactly?" "First, damage assessment," I explained. "Richard has been excluding me from critical discussions, but other people have been in those rooms. I need to know what decisions have been made, what commitments established, what relationships damaged." "I can help with that," Elena said immediately. "Jackson may be Richard's golden boy, but most of the team still talks to me." "Good. Second, we need to identify who stays and who goes after the board meeting. Richard has brought in his own people. Some may be valuable, others merely loyal. To him, I'll need objective assessments." She nodded. "And third?" "Third is trickier," I admitted. "We need to quietly reach out to key clients who've been neglected or mishandled under Richard's leadership. Not to make promises, but to re-establish communication channels so we're ready to move quickly after the transition." "Risky," Elena observed, "if Richard catches wind of those conversations." "Which is why they need to be extremely discreet. Informal check-ins, relationship maintenance, nothing that signals a pending change." I took a sip of wine. "I'm not asking you to do anything that could jeopardize your position, Elena. Just information gathering for now." She laughed, a short, decisive sound. "Are you kidding? Richard made me report to Jackson, who knows less about integrated marketing than my teenage nephew. I'm all in." We spent the next 2 hours strategizing, identifying information sources, and communication methods that would minimize suspicion. Throughout the conversation, I was struck by Elena's immediate alignment with my goals. No questions about her own advancement, no attempts to leverage her support for future gain, just ready commitment to rebuilding what Richard had fractured. "You know," she said as she was leaving, "the team has stayed largely because of you. Not the company, not the work, you. They believed you'd find a way to fix this, even when it seemed impossible." Her words stayed with me long after she'd gone, adding a dimension of responsibility I hadn't fully considered. This wasn't just about reclaiming my position or exacting justice on Richard. People had put their faith in me, anchored their professional lives to the belief that I would navigate us through this turbulence. Whatever came after the board meeting, I needed to honor that trust. The weekend provided a brief respite from the office tensions, but Monday brought a new escalation. Arriving at work, I discovered my security access had been downgraded. My badge no longer opened the executive floor doors or the main conference rooms. My parking assignment had been relocated to the general lot, furthest from the building entrance. Was considering how to respond to this latest provocation when my phone rang. Catherine Blackwell. "Can you meet for coffee?" she asked without preamble. "There's been a development." We met at a small cafe 2 blocks from the office, tucked away enough to avoid running into Blackwell employees. Catherine was already there when I arrived. Her expression serious as she nursed a large black coffee. "Dad's being discharged today," she said as I sat down. "The tests showed some arrhythmia issues, but nothing immediately life-threatening. He'll need ongoing monitoring, though." "That's relatively good news," I replied, relief evident in my voice. "How's he feeling?" "Physically, stable. Mentally." She hesitated. "He's angry, Olivia. The doctors forced him to rest, so he's had nothing to do but read financial reports and board updates. He doesn't like what he's seeing." "Richard's leadership?" She nodded. "The company's financials are solid on the surface, but Dad sees concerning patterns. Client churn has increased 18% this year. R&D investment has been cut while executive compensation has risen dramatically. The strategic pivot toward enterprise clients has alienated the mid-market segment that was our bread and butter. None of this was surprising. Richard had been focused on short-term metrics that would impress the board and justify his leadership, even at the expense of long-term stability. "There's more," Catherine continued, lowering her voice despite the cafe's privacy. "Dad authorized a discreet audit of executive expenses. Richard has been categorizing personal expenditures as business costs, significant amounts. Private, jet upgrades, luxury accommodations, entertainment that had nothing to do with client development." My stomach tightened. Financial impropriety was more serious than strategic disagreements or personal vendettas. "Does the board know?" "Not yet. Dad's preparing a full report for the meeting." She leaned forward. "But Richard knows something's coming. One of the financial analysts who assisted with the audit was fired yesterday, allegedly for data security violations. It's got Dad worried that Richard might try to control the narrative before the meeting." "How would he do that?" "Board. Members have relationships with Richard independent of Dad. He could be reaching out, presenting his version of events, potentially even scheduling one-on-one meetings before the full board convenes." I considered the implications. This changes the timeline. If Richard is trying to establish a counter-narrative with the board— Exactly. Dad thinks we should accelerate filing your ownership documentation. Get it registered this week instead of waiting until just before the meeting. The suggestion made strategic sense, but it would sacrifice the element of surprise. If Richard discovered my ownership status before the meeting, he'd have time to prepare a response, perhaps even attempt some kind of emergency restructuring to dilute my authority. "Let's split the difference," I suggested after weighing the options. "File the documentation, but request confidential processing. It becomes legally official but doesn't appear in public records until after the board meeting." Catherine nodded slowly. "That could work. I'll speak with the attorneys today." Back at the office, I found a meeting request from Richard waiting in my inbox. The subject line read simply, "Final discussion, your departure." It was scheduled for Wednesday afternoon, 2 days away. The directness of it sent a chill through me. Evidently, Richard had abandoned subtlety in favor of brute force. I forwarded the invitation to Catherine with a brief message. Timing becoming critical. Wednesday meeting will likely involve HR termination proceedings. Her response came within minutes. Attorneys expediting documentation. Should be filed by tomorrow evening. The office that afternoon was unusually quiet. Several of Richard's inner circle, including Jackson, were absent, presumably in off-site meetings. Elena texted that she'd overheard mention of contingency planning but couldn't get details. The atmosphere felt charged, like the heavy stillness before a thunderstorm. That evening, I worked late, using the quiet to review client files and financial reports, building my understanding of the company's current position. Around 8, most employees had left, leaving the floor dimly lit and silent. I was gathering my things to leave when the elevator dinged, and familiar footsteps approached my office. Still here? Dedication or desperation, I wonder. Richard leaned against my doorframe. His tie loosened, a subtle scent of scotch on his breath. He'd clearly come from dinner, slightly relaxed by alcohol but not impaired. Just catching up on work, I replied neutrally. Given my exclusion from recent meetings, he smiled, the expression not reaching his eyes. Always the professional, Olivia. It's almost admirable, this stubborn refusal to accept reality. I continued packing my bag, determined not to engage with his provocation. You know, he continued, entering my office uninvited. I actually respected you when I first joined Blackwell. You'd built something impressive from nothing. But then I realized your fundamental limitation. Despite my resolution, curiosity got the better of me. Which is? You think business is about building things. He settled into the chair opposite my desk. It's not. It's about power, acquiring it, wielding it, protecting it. Everything else is sentimentality. Is that why you've been systematically dismantling what Gerald and I built? To demonstrate your power? Richard laughed, a genuine sound that surprised me. I've been creating something better, more profitable, more competitive. Your attachment to the old ways is exactly why you couldn't lead this company into its next phase. And the financial improprieties? Were those also necessary for Blackwell's evolution? His expression hardened, confirming Catherine's information had substance. Careful, Olivia. Unfounded accusations could constitute defamation. Just like humiliating a long-term executive at a company event could constitute a hostile work environment, I countered. We stared at each other across the desk, the pretense of civility evaporating. Wednesday's meeting isn't optional, he said finally, rising from the chair. HR will be present. Severance terms will be presented. After that, your access to company systems will be terminated. I'll be there, I assured him. Though perhaps not in the capacity you're expecting. He frowned, studying my face. You're surprisingly confident for someone about to be unemployed. Let's just say I'm looking forward to the board meeting. The board meeting will only formalize what's already decided, he stated flatly. Your position at Blackwell is over, Olivia. Whether you leave with dignity and a generous package or get escorted out by security is entirely your choice. With that, he turned and left, his footsteps echoing in the empty office. I sat alone in the silence that followed, his words hanging in the air. Richard genuinely believed in his absolute authority, that the board existed merely to rubber stamp his decisions, that the company's legacy employees were disposable, that Blackwell itself was just a vehicle for his ambition. The irony would have been amusing if it weren't so potentially destructive. In 2 days, he planned to terminate my employment. In 2 weeks, he would discover I owned the company. The question was no longer whether Richard would fall, but how much damage he might do in the interim. Tuesday brought confirmation from Catherine that my ownership documentation had been filed with the corporate registry, marked confidential, until the board meeting date. Legally, I was now officially recognized as Blackwell's majority shareholder, though the information remained private. That same day, Elena discovered the reason for the previous day's absences. Richard had taken his inner circle to a closed-door strategy session at his country club. The agenda included contingency planning for potential disruption at the upcoming board meeting, a clear indication that Gerald's audit had Richard worried. They're developing responses to various scenarios, Elena reported during our lunch, outside the office. Financial discrepancies, strategic missteps, client dissatisfaction. Jackson's been assigned to prepare a comprehensive defense of the marketing reorganization, specifically addressing your removal. Any mention of ownership changes? I asked carefully. She shook her head. Nothing, I heard. They seem focused on defending Richard's decisions to the board, not questioning the board's composition. Good. What about client reactions to recent changes? Mixed at best. The Preston Group is particularly unhappy. They've been threatening to review their contract since Jackson took over their account. Harrison Financial hasn't renewed their annual services agreement yet, which is unprecedented. And Westlake Pharmaceuticals has explicitly requested your involvement in their upcoming product launch. This aligned with what my own discreet inquiries had revealed. Richard's drive for efficiency had damaged relationships with long-standing clients who valued personal attention and institutional knowledge. His aggressive pursuit of larger contracts had come at the expense of reliable mid-market partnerships that had sustained Blackwell through previous market fluctuations. One more thing, Elena added, lowering her voice further. There's a rumor that Richard is considering selling the Horizon platform. This was unexpected. Horizon was Blackwell's original flagship product, the enterprise communication system that Gerald had pioneered. Though no longer our highest revenue offering, it remained profitable and served as the foundation for many of our client relationships. Why? Would he sell it? The maintenance contracts alone generate steady revenue. Apparently, an overseas conglomerate made an offer, significantly above market value. Richard sees it as unlocking underperforming asset value to fund expansion in other areas. The short-sightedness was breathtaking. Selling Horizon would provide a one-time cash infusion, but permanently sever our relationship with dozens of long-standing clients. It was the corporate equivalent of selling the foundation to renovate the penthouse. When is this deal supposed to happen? That's the thing, Elena said, concern evident in her voice. They're pushing to complete it before the board meeting. Preliminary paperwork is already with legal. I felt a chill despite the warm afternoon sun. Richard wasn't just redecorating the house. He was selling off parts of it before the rightful owner could take possession. If he completed the Horizon sale before the board meeting, unwinding it would be complex and potentially costly. I need details on this deal, I told Elena. Timing, terms, who's involved. I'll see what I can find out. But Olivia, if they're moving this quickly, they must know something's coming at the board meeting. Richard's accelerating everything. Your termination, the Horizon sale. It's like he's trying to create irreversible changes before someone can stop him. She was right. The timetable had compressed dramatically. Tomorrow's HR meeting now looked like part of a larger strategy to cement Richard's vision for Blackwell before Gerald or the board could intervene. My original plan to wait patiently for the board meeting suddenly seemed dangerously passive. As we walked back to the office, I made a decision. Change of plans. I'm not waiting for Wednesday's ambush or the board meeting. It's time to be proactive. Elena glanced at me, surprise mingled with anticipation. What are you going to do? I checked my watch. Just after 1 p.m. First, I'm going to have a conversation with our legal department about the Horizon sale. Then, I'm going to call an emergency board meeting. Her eyes widened. Can you do that? I thought only the CEO or chairman could call board meetings. I smiled, the first genuinely confident smile in weeks. Majority shareholders can also call emergency meetings under certain conditions. I'd say imminent unauthorized sale of core assets qualifies. As we reached the building entrance, Elena paused. Richard will fight back. Hard. I'm counting on it, I replied, holding the door open. It's time everyone saw exactly who he is and who I am. The transition from defense to offense had begun. After weeks of enduring Richard's systematic campaign against me, I was finally stepping into my power. Not just as CMO, but as Blackwell's owner and rightful leader. The board meeting would still be the formal recognition of that authority, but I wasn't waiting anymore. Richard had wanted war. Now he would get one. The legal department was my first stop after lunch with Elena. Martin Chen, Blackwell's general counsel, looked up in surprise when I appeared in his doorway. He'd been another early employee, joining a year after me, though. We'd gradually grown apart as his role aligned more closely with Richard's executive team. Olivia, he said, quickly minimizing whatever was on his computer screen. This is unexpected. I need to talk to you about the Horizon sale, I stated, closing his office door behind me. His expression flickered. Surprise, then wariness. I'm not sure what you're referring to. Martin, we've known each other for 14 years. Let's not waste time with denials. I sat across from him. I know Richard is pushing through a sale of the Horizon platform before the board meeting. I need to understand where that process stands. He studied me carefully, weighing his options. Any potential transactions would be confidential, Olivia. And frankly, since marketing has been reorganized, this wouldn't fall under your purview. I leaned forward, lowering my voice. Before you decide where your loyalty lies, you should know that I've formally filed documentation confirming my status as majority shareholder of Blackwell Innovations. Martin's face drained of color. That can't be right. The paperwork was filed today. The conversion of my shares from the 2010 recapitalization gives me 51.3% ownership. Gerald Blackwell can confirm this. Richard never mentioned, he began, then stopped himself. Richard doesn't know yet, I said. But as company counsel, you now do. So I'll ask again. What's the status of the Horizon sale? Martin's legal training reasserted itself as he processed this information. If what you're saying is true, it is. Then any major asset sale would require your approval. He hesitated, then reached for a folder on his desk. The preliminary agreement was drafted yesterday. Meridian Global has offered $28 million for the Horizon platform and client contracts. I frowned. That's significantly above market value. Yes. Richard presented it as an opportunity too good to pass up. The board call to approve it is scheduled for tomorrow morning. Cancel it, I said firmly, and inform Meridian that Blackwell is not entertaining offers for Horizon at this time. Olivia, I can't just— You can and you will, I interrupted. Or I'll have a new general counsel by the end of the week. Your choice, Martin. He stared at me, recalibrating years of professional relationships in real time. Finally, he nodded. I'll handle it, but Richard won't take this quietly. I'm counting on it, I replied, standing. One more thing. I'm calling an emergency board meeting for tomorrow afternoon. As general counsel, you'll need to facilitate the notification. On what grounds? Potential financial impropriety and unauthorized attempt to sell company assets. I paused at the door. And Martin? Choose carefully what you tell Richard about our conversation. Your future at Blackwell depends on it. As I walked back to my office, I felt a surge of confidence I hadn't experienced in months. The balance of power had shifted, though Richard didn't know it yet. My next call was to Catherine, bringing her up to speed on the accelerated timeline. I'll make sure Dad is prepared for tomorrow, she assured me. Do you want me to inform the other board members about your ownership status before the meeting? No, I decided. Let's keep that revelation for the meeting itself. Just make sure they all attend. The remainder of the afternoon passed in a blur of preparation. I worked with Elena to compile documentation of the marketing department's performance before and after Richard's interference, collected client testimonials, and prepared a strategic vision for Blackwell's future, my first act as the company's rightful leader. At 4:45 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Martin. Board meeting set for 2 p.m. tomorrow. All members confirmed attendance. Are not yet informed. 15 minutes later, as I was reviewing financial projections, my office door burst open. Richard stood in the doorway, face flushed with anger, Jackson hovering anxiously behind him. What the hell do you think you're doing? He demanded. I looked up calmly. Working. Something you've been trying to prevent for weeks. Cut the crap, Olivia. Martin just told me the Horizon deal is off and there's an emergency board meeting tomorrow that I didn't call. He stepped closer, lowering his voice to a threatening level. Whatever game you're playing ends now. It's not a game, Richard. It's governance. I run this company, he hissed. Me. Not Gerald, not the board, and certainly not you. I met his gaze steadily. The board meeting is at 2 p.m. tomorrow. I suggest you prepare to explain the Horizon sale, among other things. For a moment, I thought he might actually strike me. His hands clenched into fists, and a vein pulsed visibly at his temple. Instead, he leaned across my desk. You have no idea what you've started, he warned. By this time tomorrow, you won't just be out of a job. You'll be radioactive in this industry. We'll see, I replied, returning to my work as if he weren't there. After a few seconds of tense silence, he stormed out, Jackson trailing behind like a nervous shadow. Elena appeared in my doorway moments later. Holy hell, she whispered. What? Just happened? Richard looked like he was about to explode. The board meeting is set for tomorrow, I explained. Martin canceled the Horizon sale. Richard just found out. And he didn't fire you on the spot? He can try, I said with more confidence than I felt. But after tomorrow, he won't have that authority. Elena closed the door and lowered her voice. The office is buzzing. Half the executive floor saw Richard's meltdown. People are speculating wildly. Good, I replied. Let them wonder. By tomorrow afternoon, everything will be clear. I stayed, late that night, ensuring every detail was prepared for the confrontation ahead. Around 9 p.m., Catherine called with an update. Dad reviewed all the documentation. He's formally requesting a full financial audit as part of tomorrow's meeting. She paused. Olivia, Richard's been calling board members all evening. We don't know what he's telling them, but he's clearly trying to build a coalition. Let him try, I said. Once my ownership is revealed, their loyalty to Richard won't matter. Don't underestimate him, she cautioned. He's desperate and cornered. That makes him dangerous. I knew she was right. Richard wouldn't surrender without a fight, and he still had several hours to prepare his defense. But the momentum had shifted, and for the first time in months, I held the stronger position. The next morning, I arrived early to find security guards posted outside my office. Ms. Parker, one of them said uncomfortably, Mr. Bennett has instructed that you're not to access your office or company systems pending today's meeting. I smiled, unfazed. That's fine. I'll work from the conference room. The guard shifted awkwardly. We're instructed not to allow you access to any company facilities except the boardroom at 2 p.m. I see. I pulled out my phone and dialed Martin's number. Martin, I'm being blocked from entering my office by security. Please remind them who will be owning the company as of this afternoon and the potential consequences of following unlawful orders. The guards exchanged nervous glances. Within minutes, Martin appeared, looking harried. Let her pass, he instructed. The guards. Richard's orders are premature. They stepped aside reluctantly. As I entered my office, I noticed my computer had been removed, along with several files. He's destroying evidence, I told Martin. Document this. Martin nodded grimly. The board has been notified of potential document removal. I've implemented preservation protocols. The hours until the board meeting crawled by. Richard had apparently barricaded himself in his office with his inner circle. Various executives wandered the halls looking confused, unsure which power center to align with. Elena reported that Jackson was frantically calling clients, attempting to secure statements of support for Richard's leadership. At 1:30, Catherine texted, Dad has arrived. All board members present. Legal counsel documenting everything. At 1:55, I gathered my materials and walked calmly to the boardroom. Employees stopped to watch as I passed, the tension in the air, palpable. Elena gave me a thumbs up from her desk. The boardroom fell silent as I entered. 7 people sat around the massive table. Gerald at the head, looking frailer than I remembered but with fire in his eyes. 4 other board members, 2 venture capitalists who'd invested in our early rounds, and 2 industry veterans Gerald had recruited, Catherine standing behind her father's chair, and Martin, legal pad at the ready. No Richard. He's refusing to attend, Gerald explained, his voice stronger than I'd heard in months. Says this meeting is procedurally invalid, and he won't legitimize it with his presence. I nodded, taking the empty seat to Gerald's right. That's his choice. Before we begin, Gerald said, addressing the board, there's an important matter of corporate governance to address. He nodded to Martin, who distributed folders to each board member. These documents confirm what I should have formalized months ago, Gerald continued. During our financial crisis in 2010, Olivia Parker purchased special class shares that have since converted to voting shares. As of yesterday, these shares have been officially registered, confirming Ms. Parker as the majority shareholder of Blackwell Innovations with 51.3% ownership. The room erupted in murmurs as board members flipped through the documentation. Gerald raised a hand for silence. This is not a recent development or a maneuver to undermine Mr. Bennett. These shares were purchased 13 years ago, with the conversion trigger established at that time. My illness unfortunately delayed the formal registration process. One of the venture capitalists, Thomas Reed, spoke first. Gerald, with all due respect, why are we only learning about this now? This fundamentally changes the governance structure we've been operating under. A fair question, Gerald acknowledged. The conversion was triggered by my retirement as CEO, but the formal registration was delayed due to my health issues. I take full responsibility for the oversight. Another, board member Patricia Winters, looked up from the documents. These appear to be in order. But what does this mean for Richard's position? For the company's leadership? Before Gerald could answer, the boardroom door burst open. Richard stood in the doorway, eyes blazing, Jackson and two other executives behind him. "This is a sham," he announced, striding into the room. A desperate ploy by Gerald to regain control through a proxy. "The documentation is legally binding," Martin stated calmly. "Verified by outside counsel." Richard slammed his fist on the table. "Convenient timing, don't you think? Just as I'm implementing necessary changes to modernize this company, suddenly, Olivia has majority ownership? This is corporate manipulation, plain and simple." I remained silent, letting Richard's anger undermine his credibility with every word. "Richard," Gerald said firmly, "please take a seat. We have serious matters to discuss beyond the ownership structure." "Like what?" Richard snapped. "Like the unauthorized attempt to sell the Horizon platform," Gerald replied. "Like the financial irregularities identified in our preliminary audit. Like the systematic dismantling of successful departments and alienation of key clients." Richard's face flushed. "Every decision I've made has been to strengthen this company's position. The old guard is simply resistant to necessary change." "Is expensing personal travel as business costs necessary change?" Gerald asked quietly. "Is forcing out our most experienced executives while installing friends and relatives strengthening our position?" For nearly an hour, the meeting continued in this vein, Richard defending his decisions with increasing desperation, while Gerald methodically presented evidence of mismanagement. Throughout, I remained mostly silent, allowing Richard to reveal himself through his own words and reactions. Finally, when Richard had talked himself into a corner regarding the Horizon sale, I spoke. "The fundamental issue," I said calmly, "is not whether any individual decision was right or wrong. It's that Blackwell has been moving away from the principles that made it successful. Client relationships built on trust, innovation driven by need rather than market trends, and a culture that values experience and institutional knowledge." All eyes turned to me as I continued. "As majority shareholder, I have a responsibility to ensure this company remains true to those principles while evolving to meet changing market conditions." I looked directly at Richard. "Your leadership style is incompatible with that vision." Richard glared back. "You can't fire me. The board serves at the pleasure of the shareholders," Gerald interrupted gently. "And the majority shareholder has expressed her lack of confidence in your leadership." Thomas Reed cleared his throat. "Procedurally, we should take a formal vote. But I believe the outcome is clear." He looked around the table, receiving nods from the other board members. "Richard Bennett," Gerald said formally, "you are hereby removed as Chief Executive Officer of Blackwell Innovations, effective immediately." The silence that followed was absolute. Richard stood frozen, his face a mask of disbelief and fury. "You'll regret this," he finally said, looking directly at me. "All of you." Then he turned and stormed out, his entourage trailing behind in stunned silence. As the door slammed behind him, Gerald turned to me with a tired smile. "And now, the hard part begins." The boardroom cleared quickly after Richard's dramatic exit. Only Gerald, Catherine, Martin, and I remained, the weight of what had just transpired settling around us like dust after an explosion. Security will escort him off the premises, Martin said, already typing furiously on his tablet. I've initiated protocols to revoke his system access and preserve all records. Gerald leaned back in his chair, fatigue evident in the slump of his shoulders. He won't go quietly. Expect litigation, public statements, attempts to poach clients. Let him try, I replied, gathering my notes. We have documentation of every misstep, every breach of fiduciary duty. If he wants to air this publicly, he'll only damage himself further. The more immediate concern, Catherine interjected, is the leadership vacuum. The company needs direction, especially after such a visible disruption. All eyes turned to me, and I felt the full weight of my new reality. I wasn't just the wronged executive who'd reclaimed her position. I was the majority owner, responsible for the livelihoods of over 200 employees and the trust of dozens of clients. Interim leadership structure, I said decisively. I'll assume the CEO role temporarily, while we assess the damage and stabilize operations. Elena Thompson will take over as Chief Marketing Officer. Martin, I need you to audit every decision Richard made in the past 6 months, particularly personnel changes and client agreements. Gerald nodded approvingly. What about Jackson and Richard's other appointees? I considered this carefully. Case-by-case evaluation. Some may have been following orders out of self-preservation. Others were active participants in the dismantling. I won't conduct a wholesale purge. That's Richard's approach, not mine. The company will be watching how you handle this, Catherine observed. Your response sets the tone for everything that follows. She was right, of course. The manner of Richard's removal had been necessarily abrupt, but the transition needed to be measured and thoughtful. Blackwell couldn't afford more destabilization. The executive team together, I told Martin. 4 o'clock, and draft a company-wide communication explaining the leadership change in straightforward terms. No accusations, no drama. As we left the boardroom, the corridor fell silent. Employees, watching with barely concealed curiosity. I stopped at Elena's desk on my way back to my office. Congratulations, she said quietly, eyes wide with lingering disbelief. Or should I say, Madam CEO? Don't start, I warned with a small smile. I need you in my office in 15 minutes. We have an executive meeting at 4, and you're attending as the new CMO. Her face registered shock, then determination. I'll be ready. My office felt different as I entered it, perhaps because I now recognized it as just a temporary space before moving to the CEO's suite. I allowed myself exactly 2 minutes to absorb the magnitude of what had happened, then got to work. Enough. Executive meeting was predictably tense. Of the 12 department heads, 5 had been Richard's direct appointments. They sat stiffly, expressions guarded, clearly expecting a bloodbath. The others showed varying degrees of surprise, confusion, and cautious optimism. I'll be direct, I began once everyone was seated. As of today, I am Blackwell's majority shareholder and interim CEO. Richard Bennett has been removed by board action. Murmurs rippled around the table. I raised a hand for silence. This transition was abrupt by necessity, not preference. My priority now is stabilizing our operations and reassuring our clients and employees that Blackwell remains committed to the excellence and innovation that built our reputation. I looked at each face in turn, making deliberate eye contact. I am not conducting a purge. Your positions will be evaluated based on performance and alignment with company values, not personal loyalty. That said, I expect complete transparency about the state of your departments and any decisions made under the previous leadership that might impact our stability. Derek Winters, Richard's hand-picked CFO, spoke first. With respect, this is highly irregular. The board can't simply... The board acted with full legal authority, Martin interrupted. The documentation has been verified by outside counsel. Ms. Parker's majority ownership is legally binding and predates Mr. Bennett's tenure as CEO. Derek subsided, but his expression remained skeptical. "I understand this is sudden," I acknowledged. "Each of you will have an opportunity to meet with me individually over the next week. For now, I need situation reports from each department by 9 tomorrow morning, particularly highlighting any urgent issues requiring immediate attention." The meeting proceeded with remarkable professionalism, considering the circumstances. When it concluded, I asked Jackson to remain behind. Once we were alone, he spoke before I could. "I assume my resignation would be preferred." I studied him thoughtfully. The ambitious young man who had been Richard's instrument in my marginalization now looked smaller somehow, his confidence deflated. "That depends," I replied. "Were you following orders or actively driving the agenda?" He hesitated, weighing his options. "Both, if I'm honest. I saw an opportunity for advancement and took it. Richard's methods sometimes seemed excessive, but—" He trailed off. "But questioning him wasn't conducive to your career goals," I finished. "For him." "Something like that," he admitted. I considered him for a moment longer. "I'm not accepting your resignation today, Jackson. I'm reassigning you. Special projects under Elena's supervision. Your first task is to reach out to every client whose account you took over in the past year. Ask what they need, what's working, what isn't. No sales pitch, no corporate speak, just honest conversation and documentation." His surprise was evident. "You're not firing me?" "Firing you would be easy, Jackson. Making you part of rebuilding what you helped damage, that's a more fitting consequence. Whether you can rebuild trust is up to you." After he left, Elena returned, carrying 2 cups of coffee. That was unexpected. I was sure Jackson would be first out the door. I accepted the coffee gratefully. Punishment isn't the goal. Restoration is. "Tell that to Richard," she said, dropping into a chair. "I just heard from marketing. He's already posting on LinkedIn about his departure to pursue new opportunities and hinting at the challenges of companies resistant to necessary modernization." I smiled tiredly. Let him spin. Actions speak louder. The next 2 weeks were among the most demanding of my career. Days stretched into nights as I navigated the complex process of stabilizing a company in transition. Each department revealed new challenges. Projects derailed, talent alienated, client relationships damaged. Richard's leadership had prioritized short-term metrics over sustainable growth, creating a facade of success that concealed structural weaknesses. Most concerning were the client relationships. Several major accounts were considering leaving, frustrated by the revolving door of account managers and the emphasis on upselling rather than service. I personally called each one, not to make promises, but to listen to their concerns and outline concrete steps for addressing them. Internally, the culture was fractured. Richard's preferential treatment of his appointees had created resentment, while his public humiliation of long-term employees had instilled fear. Rebuilding trust would take more than policy changes or team-building exercises. It required consistent, transparent leadership that aligned words with actions. By the 3rd week, patterns emerged from the chaos. The executive team stabilized, as Richard's appointees either adapted to the new culture or departed voluntarily. A few surprised me with their capabilities once freed from Richard's micromanagement. Others proved to be extensions of his worst tendencies and were asked to leave. Jackson surprisingly thrived in his new role. His ambition, channeled constructively, became an asset rather than a liability. His client listening tour produced valuable insights that informed our service improvements. Elena integrated him into the marketing leadership team, providing mentorship while maintaining clear boundaries. On the 1-month anniversary of Richard's removal, Gerald invited me to dinner at his home. He looked healthier than he had at the board meeting. Some color returned to his face and steadiness to his movements. "The doctor says my heart is responding well to the new medication," he explained as we settled in his sunroom. Apparently, stress was exacerbating the arrhythmia. I can imagine, I replied. Watching Richard dismantle your life's work couldn't have been good for your health. Gerald smiled ruefully. My mistake was stepping back too completely. I thought a clean break would give Richard the freedom to lead without a founder looking over his shoulder. Instead, it removed the only effective check on his worst impulses. You couldn't have predicted how he'd behave, I said. Perhaps not specifically, but the signs were there from the beginning. His emphasis on control over collaboration, results over relationships. He sighed. But we're not here to rehash old decisions. Tell me about Blackwell today. I shared the progress we'd made, client retention stabilizing, employee morale improving, innovation initiatives rekindled. He listened intently, asking occasional questions that revealed his continued sharp grasp of business fundamentals despite his reduced involvement. And the CEO position? He asked finally. You've been interim for a month now. The board is conducting a formal search, I explained. I've agreed to remain until a suitable candidate is identified. Gerald raised an eyebrow. And if the most suitable candidate is already in the role? I smiled. That's not for me to determine. It's precisely for you to determine, he countered. You're the majority shareholder. The board makes recommendations, but the final decision is yours. I hesitated, confronting a question I'd been avoiding. Did I want to be CEO permanently? The role demanded different skills than marketing leadership, a broader vision, more political navigation. The past month had been challenging, but also invigorating in ways I hadn't anticipated. I'm considering it, I admitted. But I want the decision to be based on what's best for Blackwell, not what's most satisfying for me personally. Gerald smiled. The fact that you recognize the difference is precisely why you'd excel in the role. 2 days later, Catherine stopped, by my office, now relocated to the CEO suite. The space had been transformed from Richard's sterile minimalism to something warmer, more collaborative, with comfortable seating for impromptu meetings and walls showcasing Blackwell's history and achievements. The transformation goes beyond decoration, she observed, settling into an armchair. People are different, more engaged, less guarded. Even the reception area feels more welcoming. Culture reflects leadership, I replied. Richard created an environment of competition and insecurity because it served his purposes. I'm trying to rebuild the collaborative spirit that made Blackwell special in the first place, while still modernizing where necessary, she added. I've seen the new strategic plan. It's impressive, honoring the company's foundations while adapting to current market realities. I smiled at her assessment. Balance is everything. Change for its own sake is just disruption. Change with purpose is evolution. Speaking of evolution, Catherine said, have you heard the latest about Richard? I shook my head. After the initial flurry of carefully worded statements, Richard had gone uncharacteristically quiet. His attempt to start a competing firm is struggling, she reported. The financial backing he secured initially has been withdrawing as word of his Blackwell tenure spreads. Several executives he recruited have already departed. Apparently, his leadership style is even less effective without institutional support. Behind it. The news didn't bring the satisfaction I might have expected months ago. I'm not surprised, but I take no pleasure in it. No? Catherine looked genuinely curious. After how he treated you, the public humiliation, the systematic undermining, you don't feel even a little vindicated? I considered her question seriously. The night of the gala, when Richard dismissed my contributions and positioned me as obsolete, I wanted nothing more than to see him fail spectacularly. That feeling sustained me through weeks of enduring his campaign against me. I paused, finding the right words. But now, watching Blackwell recover and thrive, I realized something important. Success is the best response to mistreatment. Not vengeance, not public shame, just building something better than what your detractor could envision. Catherine nodded slowly. That's remarkably generous. Not generous, I corrected. Practical. Focusing on Richard's downfall would keep me tethered to him in that chapter. I'd rather direct that energy toward Blackwell's future. The following week, the board unanimously recommended I assume the CEO position permanently. I accepted, with one condition. A formal succession planning process would begin immediately to identify and develop future leadership from within the company. The cycle of disruption that Richard had triggered would not be repeated. At my formal introduction as CEO, standing before the assembled company in our largest conference space, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this moment. Many of you witnessed what happened at our company gala 6 months ago, I began, addressing the elephant in the room directly. You saw one leader dismiss another's contributions, positioning experience as obsolescence and loyalty as limitation. A hush fell over the room as employees exchanged glances, surprised by my directness. That night revealed a fundamental difference in philosophy about what makes a company strong. Is it constant reinvention without regard for foundation? Elevation of new voices while silencing experienced ones, prioritizing perception over substance? I paused, looking across the gathered faces, veterans who had weathered the turmoil and newcomers who represented fresh perspectives. Blackwell's strength has always come from integration, not replacement. New ideas enhancing proven approaches, fresh talent learning from experienced mentors, innovation building on established excellence rather than discarding it. I gestured to Gerald, seated in the front row with Catherine beside him. Our founder understood this balance from the beginning. Now, as CEO, I'm committed to maintaining it, honoring our history while embracing our future, valuing both experience and innovation, building success that's sustainable rather than superficial. The applause that followed felt like affirmation of more than just my words. It represented collective relief that the company was returning to its core values while still moving forward. Later that evening, alone in my office with the city lights glimmering beyond my window, I opened my desk drawer and removed the name plaque Richard had presented at the gala, the one commemorating my contributions to the old Blackwell. I ran my fingers over the engraved letters, no longer feeling the sting they once carried. I placed it on my credenza alongside my new nameplate. Olivia Parker, Chief Executive Officer. The juxtaposition told a story more powerful than any speech, a journey from dismissal to leadership, from humiliation to triumph, from perseverance to vindication. The company gala was scheduled for next month. I'd already decided its theme: honoring our past, building our future. Richard's attempt to position me as a relic had backfired spectacularly. In trying to discard what he saw as obsolete, he had instead revealed the enduring value of experience, integrity, and patience. Sometimes the most powerful response to humiliation isn't immediate retaliation. It's the quiet confidence to wait for the right moment, the strategic wisdom to recognize your true strength, and the leadership vision to create something better after the storm passes. Richard had seen me as a remnant of the past. Instead, I had become the architect of Blackwell's future, a future built on the very foundation he had tried so desperately to dismantle. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.